Alright, we want to add in some areas of a little more interest down here where we have this grass. We want to put in some more unique shapes, more visible details, because what we have here is fairly indistinct. So let's use our particle foliage painting tool at this point. And remember, we can erase as well as adding new details. And erasing here will give us some highlights. We'll be erasing to a lighter color. Since everything's in multiply mode, anything we do to erase will always be a lighter color, assuming our original backdrop color was a lighter color, of course. I mean, you know what I mean. Alright, so let's load in a preset of some sort. Something that would be a good ground detail. These are looking interesting. Try these vines, perhaps. Okay, that's kind of interesting. And we want a good, since we're in the foreground, we want to have more contrast, more detail. So let's not only erase, but also add some dark variations in there. So these are the two we want to work with. Let's make these big. These two where we have the grass, we want to go in and erase some items here. See, that's making these little lighter areas, but they're not completely light because we have other details in here as well, so we're not going completely to white. And I'm just painting with the right mouse button to erase with, and I'll do that also on this other layer, and you see how we can get different results. And I might use a different foliage as well. But let's go ahead and also add a few in here in the foreground that are darker. But actually now's not the right time to be doing this, because we also want to go in and add some trees. So let's do that first. Let's find an interesting tree. We want to make some large trees. Let's see what we can find here. Let's see. I guess I won't need that anymore. That's kind of nice. Don't be afraid of destroying your work. You made it once. You can always make it again. Now in version 10, we have a nice scale slider that makes it really easy to go in and add and delete things. All right, let's add another layer. This will make it easier. Let's go ahead and start putting some middle ground trees in here. And maybe one here. Maybe make that one a little bit bigger. These are a little bit dark. We'll lighten these up a little bit in a moment. In fact, that's worth talking about. I think we're getting the idea of what we want to do. But let's make these lighter. We could just go ahead and, of course, do what we did before and use add. And we might do that. But let's talk about some of the ways we can make these lighter using the painting tools that we have. With trees, there's a tint color, which is sort of a multiply mode. Whatever we paint will get tinted by that. Since these are really dark to begin with, we're not really seeing that. There's also an ambient, which is sort of an alpha blend. It sort of alpha blends this one color with the overall color of the tree. So between the two of these, you can really create a variation of colors that's really quite nice. We want to kind of match the colors that are here. A quick way to do that would just be go back and sample that color, of course. Let's see, there's the color picker, but nobody's saying we can't just do it here. I'll go ahead and we're actually kind of light on blues here because we made that choice of using color things. I'm just going to clear that for the moment. There's a little button right there to clear the color theme. I'm going to pick a nice blue. We can always go back to that color theme. And alright, there we go. I'm going to make that a little more so. Okay. Whoops. I just erased a layer, so we can always undo that. Let's go back to that top layer we're working with. And let's paint in some of these trees. Let's not completely obliterate the background that we painted. Those are kind of nice back there. But don't, like I said, don't be afraid to paint over your work sometimes either. And like I said before, let's go to an airbrush tool and erase some of this at the bottom here, like this, and here, and there we go. Alright, so that gives us a nice middle ground. In this case, I might just go ahead and, let's see, just dissolve these out slightly to make them blend in better. No one said we couldn't do that. Alright, and we'll add one more layer to create some foreground trees. And we're getting pretty close to a point where we have an idea of where our image is going. Let's pick a nice tree for the foreground, foliage type, and we don't really know what kind of tree we want to use yet. There's so many. These classic trees are pretty good for foreground trees. There's quite a few to choose from. Let's see what we got here. I gotta reduce the ambient color now. And I might want to pick a nice, warm color since these are in the foreground. Alright. These are going to be much bigger because they're in the foreground. These are a little too small right now. Let's change the scale because we want them to be looming. Not quite that much. Alright. Let's try that one more time. The pen size was a little much. There we go. Okay. That tree to me is a little too full. Let's use a different tree. There's got to be something good here. Oh, some nice dry. Yeah, there we go. No one said the trees have to be on screen either. So, it doesn't hurt to have some variety of what's on screen either. Something to choose from now. Alright. So, no, I want something that has some character to it. I don't want just like wispy things in the foreground. These are the choices you have to make when you're an artist. And I don't want it to look like we're in the woods either. Let's see. Sometimes you just reach a point where I think you have enough on screen. I think we're kind of reaching that point. Remember, we can erase. It's sometimes useful to add a little foreground detail as well. When you have a lot of dark, it's useful to add a little light back in there. So let's do that as well. There we go. So, you get the idea anyway. And like I said, nobody said you can't paint off screen. Alright, so another thing we can do is just add a little median filter. This will kind of take some of the computer's edge off of it, some of the smoothness, and give it a little more painterly feel without really looking like we've overly, filtered it. Let's see. There's just a median filter. And nobody says we can't sharpen something to keep it sharp looking as well. So, just a little bit. Alright, so those are just a few of the things we can do. The foreground still looks like it needs some tweaking. It looks a little indistinct, the green down here. So I said we're going to mess with that. Let's go back down here to one of these layers and just look for some little weeds and things to put in there. We have plenty of weed presets. Let's try one like that. And we might add another layer, who knows. Okay, too big. Alright, there we go. Getting close to what we want there. Just adding a little variety to this foreground. And erasing, that gives us some lighter colors in the foreground as well. You know, if you make a mistake or you don't like what you've been doing, you can just erase it. Let's see, that's a little too involved. Something a little simpler. Like that, perfect. He's just giving us a little variety in the foreground here. Okay, so let's start to close down the what we're working on here. We really got enough detail in here. What we really want to do is just kind of unify the colors now. Our colors are okay, they're a little muted. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and save a copy of this. Saving in layer format so we can come back to it later. I'll keep all our layers intact. For now I'm just going to go ahead. Might tweak some colors. Let me try, see what we can get here, and just see if we can find. Ooh, that's in the foreground, so that is really giving us some interesting variety if we change those colors. Remember, warmer things will come to the foreground. Cooler things will look like they're in the background. So that's useful to be aware of. Let me merge this all now. And one very useful tool we have at our disposal is the selection fader tool. And what this does is very similar to a gradient. I'm going to go to the swap screen briefly and clear this. And if we used a gradient tool, you see basically we create a gradient and it's adjustable and it creates a gradient from one color to another color. Well, the alpha or the selection fader tool is very similar. It just does the same thing, only it applies it to the alpha channel or the selection. So let's select that from the selection menu, that selection and selection fader tool, and just drag from the bottom to about halfway up, and you see we've created this selection. It's kind of a median line here. But if we were actually to look at the selection, I'm going to go to paint on selection, and you can see what would happen. We just created a gradient from there to there. So let me click back on paint on, turn that paint on alpha mode off. So whenever we work on this selection, we're going to be working on just this foreground area. And let's adjust color. As you can see, just that foreground area is being affected. Let me try some other things. There are quite a few interesting things we can do with this. Adjusting the hue can often be interesting. As I said, things that are warm or kind of in the reds tend to look like they're more in the foreground. Also, things with more saturation tend to look like they're in the foreground. Things that are less saturated seem to recede into the background. Look at this painting. These saturated colors in the middle are now jumping out at us, and suddenly our foreground looks like it's receding. That's just weird. I mean, it kind of looks like we're in a fog, but it also looks like suddenly the middle part of our painting is coming forward, but the very foreground part is receding in the background, and that's kind of weird. So we're going to use more saturated colors in the foreground, less saturated colors in the background. Also changing the value, the brightness. Since our background is light, using darker colors in the foreground will come to the foreground. But if we use light colors in the foreground, we'd be competing with our background in this case. So that's something to be aware of. And if we adjust the contrast here, let me try not local contrast, but let's see, Let's try adjust value only contrast. This only adjusts the value channel. See, if we had little contrast in the foreground, it would look like the foreground has just kind of disappeared. It's receding into the background. But if we adjust the contrast, it really comes forward more. So these are some ways to get more, just have our painting jump off the screen more. And we want to be aware of that as we're painting. I'm going to invert the selection because we can do exactly the same thing to our background as well. Let's see. Invert selection. We can try different things such as adjusting the hue. See how we can get different looks and feels out of this. Kind of a sunset feel or more. Purple seemed to look like a storybook. I don't know. And I think I'll go with that. And if we make this too saturated, it kind of comes to the foreground. It doesn't look right. It needs to look like it's way off in the distance. Using less saturation helps us get that effect. But I think we were good the way we were in that case. Changing the value can have strange effects since, well, let's see. I think I will stick with right about there. Okay. So, I think that's about all we can do for now. A couple more tricks I think would be useful to talk about. Clear selection. Since we've run out of the point where we're out of creative ideas, one cool thing we can do to kind of get a fresh view of what we painted is just play with our brain a little bit and flip this. It's like looking at something in a mirror, and suddenly it's like we're seeing it for the first time. One thing I noticed is this tree doesn't look like it's really connected to anything. I didn't see that before, but since I flipped this, I see it now. My brain is seeing this for the first time, in a sense. So let's go ahead and actually we could load back our layer version, or we could just go ahead and paint something over that. So thanks for watching. Hope this has been educational. Still more things we can do with this painting. We could add filters to it, that kind of thing. But I think we've gotten to the point where I've explained everything I need to explain. And again, thanks for watching, and join us again on the PD Howler channel on YouTube. And ta-ta for now.